Well, Mark Lee disappeared, but that doesn't matter. I'm here with Chris Greco. So, welcome to World
Yeah.
Edition. Mark's supposed to be doing the intro, but he just disappeared, right at the last minute. But you
Well,
have something to share with your viewers before we get everybody else on, and we're going to let you do the share and talking.
okay. So basically, I wanted to fact check the fact checker, right? So Steve Rao came on yesterday and was talking about Trump's speech. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to say this out loud over the air that I am not a Trump fan. I am not. Well, he was president. He did some good things, and I appreciated what he did, and that was good, and whatever else. But let me tell you something. I don't care if the guy calms down, whatever it is. He needs to walk away from trying to be president again. I understand his bottom line is he wants to do it, and I get it. And hey, if he calms down, he might be able to do that. But I'll tell you one thing: all that's going to do is incite people, the Trump haters, to come out and vote against the guy just because they don't like him. I mean, they just don't like him. It's just a 10 million person deal that likes him. And I get it. But the thing he could do that would really bring back the Republican Party is to sit back and say, look, I support the primary. He can go in, right? But if he gets primaried, say, look, all my voters, this guy's good, go with him. And just, and this way, everybody gets together and does whatever they need to do. But I wanted to fact check the fact checker with Steve Rao. First of all, Steve talked about, hey, sea rise. And Trump had stated something about 0.06 millimeters or whatever it was. He goes, right. Oh, no, it's going to go up whatever amount of feet it is by 2030. Well, I'm going to tell you, this is from Science 2017, globalchange.gov. So it's a government website. It talks about the rise of the sea levels. And the rise of the sea levels is, hey, look, we're talking about here 0.02 inches a year, right? 0.02 inches a year. Natural variability from these 12 years basically was offset. So there was no reason, there was no honest to God sea rise between 2002 and 2014. None, zero. It was, so then that's that. So then let's talk about climate change. Here's another one, climate.gov. You see this graph? Now this graph looks really bad, doesn't it? Oh my God, look at the sea rise levels. Look what it's doing. Oh God, it's going up. Look at me by 2020, it'll be 50 millimeters. 50 millimeters.
Wait a minute, up in 50 millimeters?
Yes, I know. 50 mil. God almighty, what are we going to do? It's 50 millimeters. So
what we're going to do.
So I think you have to put everything in perspective. You have to sit back, and this is a government website. This is no kidding. Like this is two major seasonal, 3-month sea level estimates.
Speaking of things in perspective, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts around this. And
so, anyways, I thought I'd throw that out there.
I appreciate you doing that.
And the last thing I want to hit was the U.S. Now, look, I don't know whether you trust Newsweek. Newsweek is a liberal, very liberal, Democrat, whatever it is. What does it say here? Fears amount of Taliban could find itself in possession of some $85 billion worth of military equipment provided to Afghan forces. Okay, so now all of a sudden there's the $85 billion. So yeah. Trump brought it. But something, I'm going to bring up something here, and I think that this is where it really needs to come. And it said it again. Taliban now has $85 billion worth of taxpayer-funded equipment. And it goes, and then there's a list of how much they got. Now, true, this may not add up to $85 billion, but they got 22,000 Humvees. 22,000 Humvees. I don't think that's isn't that the one Humvee for every person in frickin' whatever Rhode Island or whatever it is. So I mean, you have all these weapons that are sitting there. So I think what you have to do is you have to sit back and say what is real, what is not real. But bottom line is this: first of all, Trump is not president. Biden is president. That's number one you got to bring up. Number two is that whether it's 85 billion or 18 billion or 10 billion, it's billions of dollars that we left there. And I think the DOD, what they did was the DOD said, well, that's equipment that will never be used. It was under maintenance. It was under this, it was under that. And I sit back and I go, something? I'm a military intelligence analyst. What we loved is military equipment that was left somewhere, because we would grab that up and we would reverse engineer that. And guess what we do? We would develop weapons to fight those weapons. So basically we developed we developed anti-missiles or whatever it is to be able to figure out what the frequency was on those different weapons and everything else. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to sell them to China. They're going to sell them to whomever. And so that
definitely, I
Sell 'em on
appreciate that,
eBay.
and great news items and everything. I did have a quick question for both of you, and all along those lines, as apparently, and I know that they say the same thing about the Democrats, and I'm not arguing that that isn't the case, but if the Republicans are divided and the Democrats are divided, what's going to happen in our now, after the people are elected, then we have the leadership positions. So I am wondering what's going to happen now that the Republicans have won the U.S. House majority, and apparently the Senate is still up for grabs and all in that spaces. But what is the leadership going to look like? Because you're talking about some of these statistics that are things that were said by former President Trump and all of that. But what is the leadership going to look like? And are we going to have leaders that are coming from the Trump camp? Are we going to have moderate leaders? What's the leadership going to look like? And that's on both sides, because I'm also thinking that there is fragmentation on the Democratic side as well, with like some super progressives and some people that are definitely more moderate, like Manchin and others. But what are we thinking that the leadership is going to look like? And this is for anybody that is here with us, in terms of now that we have this supposedly divided government.
Real quickly, Mark, the Senate's not up for grabs. The Senate is Democratic. The first bill the Republicans put through was on same-sex marriage. I don't get it. That's the most important thing now of the time that they have to do. The Republicans, they joined the Democrats on that.
Yeah, I did. And
There's
we
nothing
mentioned
more
that
important.
yesterday.
Immigration, crime, the economy, nothing.
I didn't get it either, and I mentioned it before, but as I mentioned before, and I'd love to hear maybe even Dan's thoughts about this, because the Mormons came out in support of the same-sex marriage, because part of what they did was they also added protection around freedom of religion and things in that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that is part of the reason that they said that they would support it, was because while it was protecting the members of the LGBTQIA community, it would also possibly protect those that are of different religious views and things of that nature. So it's going to be tied together, and therefore the Church of trying to remember the full name for the Mormons and everything. Thank you. But definitely that was an interesting stats that they took. But I agree with
the writing was on the
more
wall.
important issues
that
are going on in that sense and everything. Definitely, we got economic issues. I'm actually going to bring up something from another country and all of that in a minute. But it seems to me that there needed to be some other issues other than same-sex marriage, and I actually know people that are in that space, meaning that they are part of that community and all, and definitely think that they have the right to have some rights protected and all that. But I can think of a lot of other more pressing issues that are going on at this particular time. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about what Lee just brought up, and also the leadership.
Well, I'll tell you something. I don't have a problem at all with if man wants to marry a man, if a man wants to partner with a man, if a woman wants to partner with a woman.
I'm sorry, Chris. This is not about that. This is the first thing that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's voters. It's about voters, right? They want to get those voters for 2024. They want to say, look what we did. It's the same thing. The same thing, Lee, with the payback on the education stuff. The education
student loan forgiveness.
Student loan forgiveness. That is not happening. You notice it's not happening. But they waited until after the election to sit there and say, well, we have some problems with this. We're going to have, and that's what's going to happen. And the thing is, the only reason they got it through, the Republicans, was because of the religious freedom, which basically means this is one. Obergefell, which is currently at the Supreme Court, was a Supreme Court. That's the thing that allowed the gay marriage to begin with.
Right.
Obergefell says that the states have to give marriage certificates. The law, the bill that they just passed, does not have that in there. So the states do not have to issue marriage licenses for gay marriages. That's in the law. That's going to be in the law. So that's number one why it passed. Number two was a person like the cake bakers, say, hey, look, it's against our religion to do that. They lost. I mean, they lost their entire business because of that. But now they can sit there and say, nope, the law says I don't have to give you a cake. I don't have to have the wedding at our venue. I don't have to do anything that you want to do. You want to do it, you can do it outside underneath a walnut tree. We don't care. But the bottom line is you're not going to have it here in my place. So now all of a sudden it has that. That's why it was passed. It was kind of like, hey, you want this? You think that this somehow is gonna allow gay marriage? It's not going to allow gay marriage. All it's going to do is it's going to allow the ability for people to sit there and say, I still got to go to a state that's going to issue a marriage license. And right now under Obergefell, every state has to do that. But Obergefell is going to get overturned. And when Obergefell gets overturned, all of a sudden people are going to take a look at this bill and go, wait a minute, what did the Democrats do for us? Really, not much. Yes, it was all a bunch of.
Are you saying
No.
that politicians are disingenuous?
Oh,
never, never, Lee.
We would
No,
never have that. We don't have our
Yeah.
resident politician.
I
with
just
us
one
here
question
today.
before we move on. Why is the government in the marriage business to begin with?
Well, wait a minute. Hold on a second, Lee. Hasn't the government always been in the marriage business? Because don't you have
Why?
to get a
Who
marriage
cares?
license
Why
in
do
order
we
to
need
get
a thing
married?
called marriage certificate? For what basis? You want to get a religious wedding? Good, go for you. God bless you. But why is the government in the business of caring?
It's insurance. It has to do with insurance. It has to do with all the legality.
Benefits.
It's lawyers. Look, Lee, I'm sorry, and I always and Nick isn't here to rebut me on this, and Steve isn't. But it's lawyers.
I'm a
Lawyers
lawyer.
have to work, Lee. Lawyers have to make a living. They got to make a living, and the way they make a living is you
sorry to
have to
say.
be able to sue. And if you
I
can't
apologize.
sue, then what good is it? Right?
But,
I'm sorry. I'm
well,
sorry, Dan.
Two
You're
things,
also
two things I'm going to say and everything, and I'm going to look up when marriage certificates became a thing and all in that space because I am curious to know when that started. But Chris, stop knocking folks getting married out at trees and all along those lines and everything, because actually my dad sometimes back, I think it was a couple of years back, actually had the pleasure of officiating a wedding. I want to say it was actually a lesbian couple and all in that space. And yes, he went and got all the proper certification that he needed because he is not a minister by any sense of the imagination and all of that. But he did
Google.
officiate that ceremony, and it was an outside ceremony. And it is my understanding that it was a lovely ceremony, and they are happily married since Dad was the official officiant, I think is what they call that title when you get the proper qualifications.
Are we saying polygamy now is going to be legal? Why
Say
not?
what?
Well, that's like saying a man can marry a 10-year-old boy. Okay, here we
Or-
go. Are we on the
brothers.
slippery slope, or can we
Well,
stop?
Why
speaking
not
of, that
brothers and
slippery, speaking of that slippery slope, apparently we can blame the some of our good friends. And no, Chris, it is not the folks from the
Not
um,
France.
from France and all of
Okay.
that, because it says when was the first marriage license issued? In what we will refer to as England, the first marriage license was introduced by the church by 1100 CE. So England. So
I'm sorry,
apparently
Mark,
that
that's
is
a
where we
religious
got that history.
certificate.
It actually came from London, and we do know that a lot of the U.S. history also comes from London as well. So apparently, we can blame the English for bringing us that lovely concept of
Dadgum.
marriage licenses and all.
They
in
invented
that space.
statistics. The English invented statistics. They invented the marriage license. Dadgummit, those
I'm sorry,
suckers.
Mark, can you do the same search with a secular certificate?
The secular certificate, 'Cause,
Yeah, versus a religious certificate.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting. While he's doing that, let's throw up. If you don't mind throwing up my share screen, Mark. I just wanted to cover some world stuff, just real
yeah,
quick.
definitely. I was going to get to a
So,
world thing as well.
and this is really important. Dan, you'll really appreciate this. Gulf of Oman, right? So I wanted to point out it was about right here. There was a cargo ship, oil ship that was struck by a drone, and it's funny because right here, that's Iran. Okay, yeah, right. So it was struck about right there. There's Iran. There's the Gulf of Oman, and it was just struck. Interestingly enough, around 2019, there were other cargo ships that were struck right in this area. So, and the drone, interestingly enough, they don't know where it came from. But beside the point, certainly wouldn't come from Iran. No. Maybe it was UAE that used the drone. No. Maybe it was Pakistan. Nope. That it sounds like Iran again. So here we have this area right in here that's undergoing some interesting situations with this with hitting that. But although that didn't make much of the news, I mean, it kind of made the news, but didn't make the news.
Maybe
I think it's very important.
Chris, maybe
Yes.
it was Muscat Love.
Or Muskrat.
See, nobody will get that. Lee will, Lee's gonna sit back and he's gonna say, "Really, you're gonna bring up Captain and Tennille? Really, the Captain and Tennille song? You're gonna bring that up, right?"
Muscat is,
Oh my gosh!
It's a
Chris-
capital of never
Oh,
mind.
this is
Chris,
so-
a few years back, ships were getting hijacked all the time.
Yeah.
Why aren't they doing that anymore?
Why aren't they doing that? Oh, off of Somalia. It was off. Now
Yeah.
that is
Why did it
interesting.
stop?
That's off the Horn of Africa. Now, if you put up my share screen again, I'll show
Started
you.
putting too much security on the ships.
Well, what's happening is, Lee, is that they tried taking an American ship,
Right.
and the U.S. Navy went in and killed them. Shot them with a freaking sniper, and that was an interesting situation. Dan, you remember this? They
Yeah.
had the scope, and the scope, they were on the bow of the ship, or what might have been a bow, stern, whatever, but I think it was stern of the ship. They were on the stern of the ship, the U.S. Navy ship, and that ship was just going up and down, right? It was going up and down, up and down. But that scope was equalized with the gyroscope, so that thing was totally still. And they took out, bam, bam, bam. They took out the and that was it. Rescued that captain. I mean, that was, and then after that, all of a sudden, it was like, maybe we won't
Maybe
take
we
any more
shouldn't do
American
that
ships.
anymore.
I don't think we'll do that anymore. That's not good. That's not cool. Yeah, you're right, Lee. All of a sudden, but is that, yes, it's still being done. There are still hijackings being done in the area around Somalia. But the thing is that who
Hey,
covers that, right?
Hey, Lee, just to let you know, since we brought the topic up and everything, and I did see something, this was like a biblical site and all that, but apparently the oldest marriage contract archaeologists have found is 4,000 years old, and is on display in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum. And apparently a brief description of the contract says the 4,000-year-old Azarian bank clay tablet was originally unearthed at the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Kotabi Kanesh in Turkey's central Kazari province. And according to new research detailed in one of those lovely medical things, the text describes the marriage of a man and a woman known as Lakotim and Hatali. As part of their agreement, it says that the husband could employ the help of a surrogate mother if the couple failed to conceive a baby 2 years after the date of marriage. So they were even talking about surrogacy back then as well. So archaeologists also found the secular law of Hammurabi from 1795 and 17 BC in 1901. It is an important archaeology discovery for a variety of reasons, and among the findings is a legal marriage contract. This reveals once again that legal marriage contracts existed before Moses was 80 years of age. So he was 80
Interesting,
Wow.
Mark. It's very interesting. Can you also do one more search, please? When the states started issuing them on a secular basis, that last one, the states. I'm curious about that.
I will see when the states did that as well. I was going to.
I could make a joke about this, but it is
segue back into that and everything.
Not do well.
But
joke about marriage?
student loans.
No,
So
I
I'll make it to
You're
that
gonna
as well.
book
But
about
you
it.
brought
Marriage
up the
certificate.
student loans, Chris, and everything, and about 200. They are saying that that case is coming to some sort of agreement because Judge grants final approval of a $6 billion student loan settlement, and that has taken place earlier. It was reported earlier today and all of that, but about 200,000 student loan borrowers who said they were defrauded by their colleges will soon have their debts automatically
good.
canceled after a federal judge granted final approval of that settlement on Wednesday.
Good,
And
and I agree with that, Mark. I mean,
Chris?
there are colleges out there that took veterans,
Chris?
specifically veterans, those buggers.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
Chris. Why is the taxpayer on the hook as opposed to the colleges?
I agree with that too. The fact is, these are, you know why? Because the colleges went bankrupt.
Right,
Because all of a
exactly.
sudden they
Go
went
after the
bankrupt.
administrators personally if there's fraud.
Yes, I'm all for going after the
But not you
congressional
and me.
representatives that took out loans, from the Social Security Trust Fund that had IOUs. I think they had to go after them, their
But
descendants,
apparently they did go
everybody.
after them. But if they're not there, because apparently the collapse of for-profit chains, Corinthian colleges in 2015, and ITT Technical Institute in 2016, they spent their final days fighting state and federal charges of fraud, which ushered in the deluge of claims at the Education Department. And the former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos refused to take action on the claims after taking office. saying that the Trump administration needed time to review the process created under Obama. So that was that whole back and forth political thing that goes on both sides and all in that space. But definitely, I agree that they probably should have gone after the folks. But it's that old saying, and I've even been the victim of that as well with on both sides. But there's this old saying that is very much common that you can't get blood from a turnip, and if there's nothing there for them to give you, then I guess you got to go after the people that gave them the money, which would be the government.
Mark, Senator Schumer just came out and made a comment about these illegals giving them some type of citizenship. If I'm not mistaken, the Democrats have the presidency. Up until a few weeks ago or whatever, they had both houses of chamber. Why didn't they just pass legislation?
I mean, there was a lot of legislation that should have been passed by a lot of things, but I think a lot of times we get caught up in political quagmires that don't need to be there. And sometimes
there is no. If they have all three chambers, there's nothing stopping them from shoving things through.
Well, but see, you're assuming, which I don't think is the case, even when I said, when I brought up the whole notion of leadership and camps, there are different camps even within the Democratic Party as well. If you get all the moderates to agree and things of that nature, and then they can pull the progressives and the conservative Democrats in, then yes, you can get stuff done.
Get everybody
there
on
is
record.
infighting even within both parties as well. So I think that's part of what happens as well. So yes, while theoretically, since you have the better part of the chambers, whatever those chambers are,
right,
theoretically you should be able to put in what you want to. But if you've got the infighting going on in both parties as well, then you wind up stopping it. So it's not always just a Democratic Republican thing that is the reason that we are stopping these things. It's also internal.
Fair enough. Chris, you made a comment before about the climate change and the sea levels rising. I'm confused. Are the banks, why do banks give loans on beachfront property? And when they do, are there clauses in there in terms of a risk?
I'll make you one better, Lee. I'll make it one better. I used to live in a place called Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And that place is the Democrat liberal. I mean, it's unbelievable. And people were built. There's a thing called a levee, right? Which is a big, gigantic, mound of dirt and
like
grass,
New Orleans.
Yeah, like New Orleans. So these levees were like 35 feet tall, whatever it was, and people were building on the river side of the levee. They were building houses on the river side of the levee.
You mean between the levees and the water?
There you go. That's right. Building houses. The flood came in 1996, destroyed the house. Right? They didn't have flood insurance because who's going to give them flood insurance to build an outside levee? So Wilkes-Barre. So Clinton was president at the time. I was in the Air Force, active duty. I was stationed there, and Clinton came into Wilkes-Barre, and he basically said, "We'll take care of that."
Why?
So he gave them He gave them market value for their homes for those people that had built on the riverside of the levee. Gave market value. Give it permits. And I mean, everything was cool. Sure, they're going to get permits.
Why would you get permits building in a flood zone?
Exactly. Well, the thing is, why would you get permits for New Orleans to rebuild? Exactly. Okay. But you get those, right? So what happened is that they got that, and guess where they built again? I mean, it's like, oh my God, the absolute inanity of this whole thing. And I sat back and I thought, man, I got to get out of here because I just got to get out of here. I mean, it was really, really crazy.
Is it hopeless?
I'll tell you,
is Washington hopeless?
Well, Washington and a couple of other places. Because Lee, I was actually going to get to your city as well, and this is actually something that folks might find interesting. That I can actually think of some good things.
I got three cities. I got Atlanta.
I know I'm here to name one of your other cities. I know, and that's where I was going. I was going to New York. I know you got three cities, but going to New York because there has been a push, and I actually know some friends of mine that are in the charter school space. And yes, there is an African American that is in charge of the school system in New York, and apparently there is a big push in New York for neighborhood schools. And some people would say that is actually going to further lead us down the path of segregation to some degree or another. So apparently Mr. Banks, who is a educator and is the head of that particular school system, is being an advocate, David C. Banks. And he was a apparently he's the future chancellor of the New York school system, and all in that space, and also a admirer of both Malcolm X and Mike Bloomberg, with an interesting contrast to people to be an admirer of just because they're on different sides of the political spectrum and all in that line. But I was just wondering your thoughts about a push toward neighborhood schools as opposed to some of the things that happened during this whole segregation push, because he even gave an incident of how his parents, when he was in school, pulled some strings to get him into what would be considered a better school, and all in that line.
I want to back up a little bit on what you're saying and ask Chris a question, and you'll see the relationship between them. Chris, you're in the military. Veterans or even active military, they get educational benefits to the GI Bill that they can take to go to any college that they want. They don't have to go to government colleges.
No, well, not just that. The post 9/11 GI Bill, Lee, is totally different. They can go for actual programs. Before, when my era and Dan's era, when we had to take courses, like each course was covered separately.
Okay.
Well, now you can go whole programs. You can sit there and say, I want a program in engineering. They will pay for that entire program.
And you can go wherever you want.
Yes, and you can give it to your kid. You can give it to your child. You can give it to your spouse. You can actually take the post 9/11 GI Bill. If you don't use it, you can actually give it. If you don't use it, you can give it to your kid. Okay. You know, and it's all of a sudden it's like a full scholarship.
Yeah, Mark. The reason I asked Chris that question is I didn't understand why we don't have school vouchers for students to take those dollars and go wherever you want, whether it's in public schools, charter schools, parochial schools, private schools, wherever you want. It should go with the child, just like it goes with the military person.
And that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, Banks says that he didn't think that either African American or Hispanic kids could successfully compete for the spots. And despite his own experiences, the chancellor doesn't think that most African American families care all that much about integration or gaining access to schools viewed as elite, which may require traveling across towns like he did. They simply want better schools in their own neighborhoods, he says, even if those schools remain segregated. So he thinks that they want better schools in their actual neighborhoods. And I can actually see that we need to improve the schools so that there isn't a push to go to like Timbuktu in order to get a better education.
And if there were school vouchers, they could get better schools in their neighborhoods.
That makes valid sense.
People would fight for the dollars.
Now, see school vouchers as
will just suck all that money out.
Things of that nature. Yeah.
You know, I think, gentlemen, that the problem is, and I'll go back to.
Well, I'm also a big fan, and actually, the reason that I got to Marquette.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right to an education. There's no right to marriage. There's no rights delineated in the Constitution for marriage. I don't think there's anywhere in the Constitution where it says, yes, you have the right to a marriage. You know, you have a right to marry. You have the right to marry. And a lot of these senators are bringing up rights. Like in the congressional record, at one point they were saying, it says, some have asserted there is no threat to these rights in America. Some have said that there is no case currently making its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court challenging these rights, so that there is nothing really to worry about. You know, and this was for the Respect of Marriage Act, which was done yesterday. And these are quotes. These are quotes by Ms. Baldwin, who is a senator from wherever. I don't know where she's from. So bottom line is that Wisconsin. So she's from Wisconsin, yeah. And so the bottom line is that rights. You're talking about rights. Do we have a right to marriage? No. But you know, it's funny. And Lee, you bring it up all the time, and I'll bring it up here because this makes all kind of sense now. There's no right to marriage, but yet they're passing laws on that. But there's a right to bear arms, but there's, you know, it's kind of like we got to take that away. And interestingly enough, in California, they have now increased the age to buy a weapon from 18 to 21. And I sit back and I go, wait a minute, if you do that, then why are we having people vote at 18? Maybe the vote should be changed. Yeah, or go into the military, or drive a car, or do anything. In other words, you can't do anything until you're 21 years old. You cannot drink until you're 21 years old. Can't drink. In any state, federal law, you cannot drink.
Wait a minute. You know that would create a riot big time. Because a bunch of drinking be going on in colleges, and those kids are under 21, the vast majority of them, and all of that. And they have a whole drinking culture.
Oh,
there,
Mark, you went to Marquette. I'm sure you didn't drink at all at Marquette.
And FSU and a few other places are famous for that.
Yeah, but Mark, you never drank.
BYU isn't, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. BYU is not. That's right.
Right.
So Mark, you certainly you didn't drink while you were at Marquette, right? You didn't drink until you're like 21, right? I mean, is that right?
Oh yeah, going to the school in Milwaukee, which is a beer capital. I did not drink until I was 21. Yeah, I'm sure that really blew and everything into that space. Speaking of Marquette and all of that. Hey, hold on a second. Speaking of Marquette, and I was actually going to tie them back to our conversation around education, because I'm also, you mentioned vouchers. One of my reasons that I got to Marquette was a gentleman by the name of Howard Fuller, and he's a leading advocate of charter schools, and he's actually done a lot of work in that space and is still very much involved in the education system. And I actually have no problem with charter schools either, because that actually is another thing that could improve things in that space as well. So like I said, the charter schools have been a variety of charter schools, everything from religious charter schools to schools that are around different minority studies and things of that kind of nature. So definitely, I think that charter schools could be an interesting answer as well if we gave them more support.
I'm not picking on the Obamas, but if I recall correctly, their kids did not go to public school.
No.
No, I don't think they did. I think they went to a charter school.
Right. The only president who sent his kid to a public school was Jimmy Carter.
But I got to look that up. But it was definitely a private school. I just can't remember.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter sent Amy to a public school in D.C. And it was funny. Saturday Night Live did a great satire on that. Dan, and Lee, you probably, Mark, you probably saw that.
Did Bill also send? Because I think Bill sent his daughter to public school too, but I don't remember.
Chelsea?
No.
You kidding?
No.
I think this is what DC.
I think where'd she go?
Is it Sidwell in DC or something like that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. She might have gone to Sidwell, but definitely. But yeah, I did know that Amy went to public school.
Yes. And I give Jimmy Carter a lot of credit for that stuff. I mean, he really did try to make it real in the presidential role. I mean, yeah, he was a failure. He was a failure of people around him. You know, Brzezinski. Remember Dan Brzezinski? Oh my gosh, he was the worst. I mean, they were so bad, and they gave him such bad advice. But let me tell you, he took responsibility for the failed rescue attempt. He said, I'm president, I'm commander in chief, I take responsibility. I thought, man, that's great. You know, I haven't heard a president take responsibility for stuff like that since. Certainly not. I mean, George W. Bush didn't take responsibility for Iraq. Obama didn't take responsibility for Crimea or any of that. He just
Benghazi.
Benghazi. Yep. Oh man, wasn't that a hot potato? Man, they were flying that around between Clinton and
it was some guy with a video or something. He was responsible for that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, it's a situation where you sit back and you say, you know, world politics aspect and what's going on. I'll tell you what. Interestingly enough, Mark, I'll tell you something about immigration. We talked about immigration at the beginning of the thing. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you know, Austria, Serbia. And I can't remember Austria, Serbia, and there was one other. It might have been Hungary. I can't remember who it was. That have decided that they're going to build a wall. They're going to build a wall. They're going to put up more guards. They're going to do whatever because people are immigrating from Northern Macedonia and that area, and they don't want them in there. So
walls don't work.
Yeah. Well, why build a wall, right? I mean, come on. What are we talking? But they're building a wall across that area so that, you know, they don't get that because they are so influxed with immigration that they can't do that. And that was interesting. Dr. Lindemann yesterday was talking about Norway. And I looked up Norway and I thought, you know, Norway, Sweden, the rest. I mean, Sweden is for Swedish. Norway is for Norwegians. I mean, it's interesting how you can sit back and say, I don't want any immigration because I want to keep my country pure. What does that sound like? I want to keep my country pure. Let's see. Wasn't that Nazi Germany in the 1930s? It was like, we want a pure Germany. That's right. We want a pure Germany, right?
I know nothing.
I see nothing.
I know nothing.
But I mean, Mark, you're right. What happens is that I don't care if we get 12 million. Yeah, well, if we get 12 million, 15 million, 20 million immigrants. All I want to make sure is that the immigrants in this country pay their fair share of taxes. As long as they pay their fair share of taxes, life is good.
Chris?
Yes.
Don't you want to, on some level, assimilate, not necessarily the religion or their culture, what have you, but into American values in terms of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution?
You know, interesting you say that. You know, we had some, there were 5 French French citizens that are currently in prison in Iran because the Iranians have taken them. Do you know what they call them? French Iranians, not Iranian French. French Iranians. Now, why do we have to call people African American, Italian American, Norwegian American? American should come first all the time. American of African descent.
Why
American.
anything after America? Why any hyphen? You're an American, period.
The bottom line is we're all Americans. Let's talk about the similarities rather than the differences.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but as I've said before, I do think it is perfectly fine, and I can say this from two fronts, because definitely not just the African Americans front, but also having cousins that are very active in the Native American culture and doing the whole powwows and things of that nature. I do not think that it is wrong or even wrong. And I've even got some friends that are Polish that are very much involved in that culture as well, and Germans, for them to celebrate aspects of their culture and to be proud of their culture. So,
that's different.
I'm good.
That's different. That's
we agree. We totally agree. We're
100%.
Furious agreement with that.
Okay.
I mean, that's absolute. I'm
and have your parades. I don't care. That's not the point.
Yeah. The point is that we're Americans. We're all Americans. We should be treated as equal in America's eyes. Do you know that Congress has an equity or equality caucus? Equality caucus. Are you freaking kidding me?
Congress has got all kinds of crazy things, but once
I know, it's like, what the hell, man?
Both of
Chris, I agree with you on we're all Americans. The people who come here illegally are not Americans.
No, that's right.
They're here illegally. They're illegal aliens, and they shouldn't be given the same protection of rights under the Constitution as citizens. The reason here is they're not citizens, and they're here illegally. Until
same thing for
and processed appropriately, then they should not have any right to be here. Period.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
our social services and our systems are not sufficiently strong to take care of even our own people, let alone the inflow of people from other countries who are coming in illegally. We just don't.
And two questions, and one of them will be a little slightly facetious and maybe even sarcastic and everything. But don't we alienate people from other parts of the world when we compare them to folks that are supposedly from another planet and all of that? Because a lot of times that's what people when they think of aliens and all that. But hold on a second, Dan. I said I was being facetious.
It's a legal term.
But the other thing is the whole notion of
Mark,
the language and all of that, because the language aspect, the other part is where I was going with the conversation.
You're illegally, and you're an illegal alien. I guess, as far as I know, we don't have anybody from Mars or Venus or Jupiter.
Not yet. Who knows? We level
walls. Are you sure about that?
Are women from Venus?
But
women from Venus, men are from Mars. And are you sure about that? Because I know some people that would argue with you all day long that they have got some direct contact to the aliens and all in that space. And like I said, I can't argue with them one way or the other because I don't know where they're from. But they want to claim that they're from there in all of that space.
Yeah,
and
before we go on, I'm going to ask Dan a question. When Trump was running initially in 2016, there was a big issue about anchor babies in the language of who is a citizen and who is not. Why doesn't Congress just clean up the language to make it clear?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We're one of the only countries that allows that. People actually fly in here to have their kids, so their kids are U.S.
or they come here illegally.
I know, and so that shouldn't be permitted, right? That shouldn't. If you're here illegally, you have a kid, you shouldn't have citizenship based on that.
Why won't they clean that up?
But Dan and Lee,
I don't know, and okay. From the Democrat standpoint, that suits their purpose.
So make it law.
Huh?
Make it law.
No, they're
not going to do that.
Make it law.
Hold on a second. From Dan and Lee's standpoint, and Chris, if you want to jump in, isn't part of the problem that is going on is that if we're going to have rules, and we're going to have these kind of rules about what's going on with the folks that are from other countries, don't we need to be fair in these rules? Because part of what happens is that if you are from one part of society, you run into one issue and you get accepted, and if you're from another part of society, you get shunned. We saw that, and I can just go back in history, but not that far in history, to the way that things were done between, say, the Haitians and the Cubans, and the way that they were treated when they came in at roughly the same time. And a lot of people would argue that it was because of the complexion of their skin and things along those lines. And we can even
Mark?
look at the way that Native Americans, that Indians are treated
I don't
versus
care,
some of
Mark.
the African nations.
If they're here illegally, they're here illegally.
Yeah,
I don't care what color they are.
You know, it's interesting, but Dan, it's interesting. I'm gonna jump on the thing with Mark here. Just for a second. So Pelosi was supposedly, allegedly, attacked by a Canadian, and that Canadian was in this country illegally. But it's interesting how, for whatever reason, why didn't he come up on the radar before this attack with Pelosi? You know, why didn't the Canadian who, and look, I'm not trying to make a, I guess I'm trying to get in with Mark on this, but I mean, he was white, you know, so all of a sudden it was like, you know, here's the Canadian who comes in illegally, and he's under the radar. He doesn't, it probably hasn't paid taxes, probably hasn't done anything. He attacks Pelosi. What's that?
If he wasn't breaking the law, why would he show up anywhere? Or when it wasn't working?
Well, I mean,
we don't have
he has
on us yet.
Well, yeah, you're right. If he wasn't working, if he had no trail whatsoever,
right?
You know, except his name. But
isn't that part of the problems? Because I mean, like a lot of the workers and a lot of the companies, you know, we talk about the folks that are illegal, but you know, a lot of times the jobs that they are getting are from American companies. I can tell you that right here in North Carolina, there is I think a truck or a car that comes by, and they oftentimes are taking folks to go work in the farms and other things.
Yeah, but they're working off the books, though. They're working for cash.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're working for cash. Exactly.
There's no way to track these people.
That's true.
Unless
I mean, you can stay off the grid as long as you're off the grid.
Right.
Yeah, you're pretty much. I wanted to, since Sasha was on, I wanted to ask Sasha if he kept in contact, or if he was up to snuff on the UN Security Council meeting where the United States, Great Britain, and I think it was one or two other countries basically blamed Russia, even though it looks like it was a Ukrainian missile. And remember what I said yesterday. I don't care if it was Ukraine. I don't care if it was frickin' Joe Schmuck with a firecracker. The bottom line is that once war spills over into innocent countries, it's kind of like when your neighbors fight and all of a sudden your tree comes down, you're going to get pissed. And let me tell you something. Basically what happened is the U.S., everyone else said, hey, we don't care. We don't care if it was a Ukrainian missile. The reason that missile was in the air was because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's Russia's responsibility. Well, interestingly enough, yeah, well, that's true. But
it wasn't done on purpose.
Right. Well, yes, you're right, Lee. You're right. I mean, there's always that scenario. But the bottom line is this: is that, you know, desperate times means desperate measures, right? If your country's being attacked and they're taking infrastructure out, you know, and it's wintertime coming and people are starving and they're basically freezing. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do what I have to do to make sure somebody doesn't forget about me out there in Ukraine while they're worrying about their inflation and their gas prices. So the bottom line is this: is that the bottom line is that they said, look, it's Russia's responsibility. And the Russian ambassador to the UN came on and said, well, you know something, we're going to throw up our hands, because no matter whether it's a Russian missile or Ukrainian missile, you're going to blame Russia. It's like, no crap, Sherlock. You bet your damn life I'm going to blame Russia. You're the ones who are firing missiles into a country that is not yours for the sake of, hey, we're going to take this country because of some denazification bullcrap. And right now I think they're pissed off because Kherson fell, which, Sasha, if you remember, you said that. You said, look, the first thing you need to do is take Kherson. If they can take that, then it's going to be a big move. And they took that within probably a week after you said that. So I think what's going to happen is that Russia is going to do whatever they have to do to try to destroy the infrastructure in Kyiv or Lviv and Kyiv and wherever else they need to be able to make sure that those Ukrainians are going to go to their knees. And the only thing that the Ukrainians are going to go on their knees on is to take a better aim at a Russian. So I would say that, they have to be really, really careful about what they do. But I wanted to see if you had kept up on that UN stuff, Sasha.
Yes. First of all, I would like to mention that village where the two Ukrainian now is affirmed missiles unfortunately killed 2 people is only slightly over 6 kilometers from the Ukrainian-Polish border.
Jeez.
So the price of a mistake, either it's Ukrainian or Russian, doesn't matter, could be quite high, because with the missiles, especially it's a Soviet-built missiles, C-300. It's been around for like 50 years. What can you expect from the Soviet
The accuracy.
Unfortunately, U.S. is not supplying Ukraine with modern weapons as quickly as it should be, but doesn't matter. With C-300, you can still fight. It's the same thing like today. If someone has a knife, he can fight with a knife. If somebody will have a gun, he can fight with a gun. Whatever you have, you are fighting with. You're not choosing, oh, I'd like to have that rifle. Oh, this one is much better. Why wouldn't they have that one? Whatever you got, you are fighting with when you are protecting your people, your nation, your country. So now the question of Russian responsibility. Not only, of course, it is their responsibility because they're firing and keep firing missiles on Ukrainian territory. And this is 100% a terrorist act, because if they're using that fighting on the front lines around Donetsk or Zaporozhye or Kherson, it's one story. When they're hitting Lviv, which is far, far away, as you can imagine, from the front lines. Lviv was never, ever Russian territory. It was rather Polish territory for centuries. And then it became Ukrainian territory after Second World War. So what business Russian bastards have to missile attack for Lviv, which is absolutely beautiful, incredible city, and they are trying to destroy it. These are acts of barbarians. They have to be condemned and be punished. And you have a party which is willing to punish them with the cost of their own lives. You don't have anybody else in this world. The France is not going to fight Russia. The English? No. The US? No. Germany? No. Who? Bulgaria? No, Bulgaria will not fight Russia. Ukraine, the only country, not even in the world, in universe, is capable to fight Russia. So please, my friends Americans, stop whining about the $5 gasoline and all that stuff. First, get rid of Russia. Second of all, your gasoline will go down to $2.
Now, what you're saying, but and along those same lines, since I know that you, Sasha, are also in the investment space, and that was one of the other stories I was going to get to, and everything that is worldwide, and all along those lines, what are we thinking about this? Because we talked about the U.S. plan, but apparently the U.K. has also unveiled a sweeping plan, that's a fiscal plan somewhere in the neighborhood of $66 billion, as it plans to plug gap and holes in the public finances and restore what they're saying is Britain's economic credibility, even as that country teeters on recession. I thought they were already in recession, but maybe I'm wrong in that space. But they've got some tax cuts that they're looking at. They've got some other things that they are looking at as part of this great plan. But they are also saying it's going to give financial hardship on millions of Britons as they confront the country's worst cost of living crisis in decades and its longest ever recession. So they're definitely looking at some measures announced were a 10% increase in the state pension benefits and tax credits, and definitely doing some other things, even in the energy space as well. So are these tactics going to work? Is this going to help Britain get out of a recession? And of course, Britain's got other issues going on as well. But what are we thinking about this notion of what's going on there. Matter of fact, they said the UK is the only group of 7 countries yet to return to its pre-pandemic size, having suffered a decade of near stagnant income growth. So the other 6 countries, I guess, have already bounced back to some degree, but not the UK. So any take on that, Chris, or Sasha?
Chris, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Sasha, go ahead. Oh, well, so
No,
let's talk about Rishi Sunak just for a second. So this guy is he was educated in the United States. He has a green card, Dan. He actually has a green card, United States green card. At one point in time, he was thinking about coming to the United States, migrating to the United States. So he decides to stay in Russia. Might as well stay in Russia. Stay in. That's where my mind is, Sasha. My mind's in Russia. Jesus. So what was I going to say? So he stays in Britain. Sorry. So he stays in the UK, and he puts forth his economic policy, which is interesting because he basically said exactly what was going to happen with Truss. That basically, hey, this is this and this and this and this, and it happened exactly that way. So now all of a sudden he's sitting back going, hey, he's at the G20 conference saying, oh, geez, we need to do something here about Ukraine, and we need to do something about Russia, and we, and in the meantime, these poor people in the UK, more people are on the poverty rolls now in the UK than ever before because of the high rate of inflation and the prices and everything else. Then they decide they're going to get rid of all the gas ovens. We're going to get rid of all the gas ovens, and in some of the Scandinavian countries, going to get rid of all the gas ovens. But the thing is, there's no electricity that flows to some of those areas. So now you got to put in electricity. You got to put in infrastructure to make electricity work. So it just goes round and round, Mark. It's a situation where you try to do something, but unless you plan ahead, it isn't going to work. And I'll tell you something about Russia. Russia, I've been taking a look at Russia from the standpoint of just their GDP. First of all, I think their GDP is $1.50 at this point in time. I think it's so. I think basically what happens is I don't know how they're going to last the winter, other than using their own gas that they produce and put a pipeline into some of the major cities. Other than that, their winter time is going to be about the same as the Ukrainians. And the UK is also going to suffer because there's a lot of cold coming their way. So I think they have a lot of challenges that Sunak is trying to put into play, and I think they're gonna have some issues.
First of all, this winter is about to be the warmest winter in the last several years, if not decades. So that solves at least some of the problem for Ukraine and UK and allied countries. Number 2, when you're talking about the new Prime Minister of England, nobody ever mentioned that it's the first time in the history of UK when a Prime Minister is much wealthier than the King of England. Have you heard about that? I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
like a billionaire.
Speaking of people being rich and everything, I see that Nick's popped in, and of course he's our trust fund baby, according to some people. I think that's what Shaquille calls him, and all in that space and everything. But there is a person that our president is from Delaware, and apparently there is a Delaware court that is dragged a major person in the world of wealth and finances into their court because he has to defend a $56 billion pay package that helped him become the world's richest man and all of that. Because apparently Mr. Musk is in a Delaware court to defend why he made that money, or maybe he paid himself that money. I don't know what else all going on in that space, but he is definitely in court and defending that. And he's also saying that he will reduce time at Twitter and eventually hand over the reins to somebody else. But what is your thoughts on that? It is a legal matter, so that's why I brought it up to you, Nick, and all of that.
Hey, Mark, they're disputing his pay package he got from Tesla, which would net him about $55 billion in compensation, enough to pay all his Twitter debts off. So our friend Elon Musk wants his $55 billion pay package. Okay, and you can't blame him because his arguments are, hey, the board agreed to it, blah, blah, blah. But the counter arguments, and the reason they're in the Delaware Chancery Court, is they're saying, no, you manipulated the board. They breached their fiduciary duty to allow such a huge pay package. Now, the irony of this is coming at a time where Elon Musk has no problem cutting all these people, making $100,000 to $200,000 a year because they're not working hard enough in his brain. Okay, well, why this guy's sucking in $55 billion. Now, Shaquille's not here to defend the ultra rich
Nick,
famous, but
Nick,
we have
I'm
a
sorry.
defender of the ultra rich and famous. Okay, Lee. Let's hit it.
I'm sorry. Why does he need the money? Doesn't he have the stock? Doesn't he have equity?
No, okay. As everybody knows, okay, and Bill Gates pointed it out a long time ago. My net worth is based on the valuation of my stock traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Here's the
Correct.
problem with that. Here's the real problem. Let's imagine Elon goes, I need the cash. Okay, Elon, you need the cash. I'm going to sell my stock in Tesla. He's got two problems. Number one, he has to actually make an announcement to everybody through the SEC that his stock's being sold, which depresses the value of the stock.
Yeah, but
Why
sometimes
is this
stocks are
owner
sold in
bailing
blocks
out?
off the market.
Okay. This is the real problem. The stockholders go, hey, look, the owner's bailing out their stock, and hence it depresses the value. Number two, he's then going to have to pick up capital gains taxes on the way out the door. So he's got two depressing effects on his Tesla stock. Problem number three, which I had talked to one of my billionaire friends about, who has controlling interest in a company. He's worth about $5 billion. Okay, one of the real problems is you can lose control of your company. So there's three problems Elon's faced with the stock sale: depressing the value, paying capital gains taxes, and losing control. All three he doesn't want. His pay package, if the money just comes to him, hey, it's great for Elon. Now, how did Bill Gates get around it? What he did is he made an announcement that he was going to systematically liquidate X amount of shares every month until he brought his holdings down on Microsoft. And years ago, and I'm talking about in the 1900s and early 2000s, that was actually a good strategy because Microsoft stock went nowhere. People don't realize that. But then recently, it's actually had a resurgence. And so he'd probably been better off with Microsoft. But in the meantime, he divested himself of a good portion of that. Those securities. So that's what's going on in the world of Elon Musk. The arguments also are further. Is he really a good CEO? And that's a good question. As Sasha knows, how do you think he would do in a chess tournament? Probably pretty poorly. He'd probably get his rear handed to him. Just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at another thing. Just because he's a good entrepreneur with PayPal and was at the right place at the right time with Tesla doesn't really mean he's a good CEO in a media business. He may be absolutely horrible, which means his threat was, now this is what I think is humorous. His threat was, I'm going to take Twitter into bankruptcy. Now think about it. I just bought a company for $44 billion. I'm getting a pay package for $50 billion, but I'm going to bankrupt the $44 billion company because, well, it's not doing well enough for me. Okay. Well, in other words, he's not going to try to bail it out. Seriously, Elon, is that what your strategy is? And it's questionable whether or not he can manage a media company. Just because he's doing well at Tesla doesn't mean he's going to do well at Twitter.
Nick, I think the purpose of his tweets is just cheap publicity. Nothing more, nothing else.
What Twitter's cheap publicity?
Some people do probably. That's how we know.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I don't personally.
Well, he's playing the Trump game. He's getting his name in the media all the time.
Absolutely, all the time.
And the thing is, that may be actually beneficial for him and his other company.
Yep.
I thought what he could do, of course, there's a potential conflict of interest. You have to have it approved by the board. Is have Tesla buy ads on Twitter. Think about it.
Very possible.
Okay?
It's like a crypto exchanges self.
That's right.
Yeah, this could be a crypto thing. And speaking of,
also, did you see that crypto that went bankrupt, Sasha?
FTX.
yeah,
It's
no,
just
it's totally
beginning.
going bankrupt, and there's
But
definitely
here's the
conversations
beauty.
in that
Here's
space.
the beauty of that. Here's the beauty of it. The owner transferred $10 billion to another company. In other words, he lent $10 billion to another company. Now, talk about all the badges of fraud for the people that got an FTX.
Nick, he's 30 years old
It's in
guy.
the Bahamas.
He needs
Oh boy,
to
that's the
leave.
bastion of really high integrity.
And actually, it's interesting that you compared Elon Musk to Trump. You see, Elon Musk is much younger than Trump. And of course, he wants to have an opportunity to be around, to turn attention to himself, to have more women, to have more kids.
Hey,
so
look.
he's in his prime.
Sasha,
So don't
Sasha.
blame him on everything.
Okay, can't blame him at all. And by the way, folks, it's almost
okay.
time
Wait a
to.
minute. I was talking to Elon the other day. His plan is to run for president. Once he gets elected, he's going to lay off.
He's not an American.
Government employees.
Yeah, he can because that's right. He's
No,
South
we're
African. He's South African, so he
50%
cannot
of the
run
government
for
Mark, he's
president.
African
unfortunately, because
American.
Yeah, he's
he is
African
South
American.
African, even though some people wonder
He
about
is African
that
American.
is well as to whether he's South African or not South African, or
Yeah,
whether
the
he's even from this
certificate
planet.
from
Because I've heard all
Hawaii.
kinds of crazy theories as to who he might be or not be, and all along those lines. I've got a lot of other news stories that we could have got to, and I'll just give a quick rundown as we wind down. As it's been another fantastic conversation, and all in that space. Nick, you'll be glad to know that officials at Yale and Harvard's law school said Wednesday the institution will no longer participate in the U.S. News and World Report annual rankings of the top law schools because they don't like the methodology, and all in that space. So they
In
said
other words, they didn't make the
that's
cut.
going to go on.
dropped in the rankings.
Yeah, and that probably didn't help either. The Virginia Department of Education is getting all kinds of flack, probably on both sides, because they have decided to change their history standards and all in that space. So there's all kinds of arguments going on in that area, and people are thinking about that. And yes, one of the favorite people of the world of music and all of that is asking for a reversal, because he has filed a motion for a new trial or reversal of his conviction, because he definitely did some horrible things with kids, or at least that's what the accusations are and what the courts have said. But R. Kelly is saying, wait a minute, I need to have y'all change the laws and all in that space. So that is another news item that's out there, because he's asking for that to take place as well. So, and we've also got the show with Win that'll be coming up later. So we're going to get on out of here and all in that space. So Nick, we do have Winning with Win, which is back on the network as well. So get ready to get out of here and do that, and do some other things as well. So always some amazing conversations. So let's get ready to get on out of here, and we can talk about those other issues that I brought up on a further edition of the show and all in that space. So that being said, let's get ready to do the outro and get on out of here.